Yeah, thanks for having us. Rob, thank you very much for setting us up to come and speak to you today. My name is Owen Paschal. I'm from Dublin originally, and for the past 2 years, I've been working at Feedback Fruits. If you haven't heard of Feedback Fruits before, what we offer is a teaching and learning system that integrates directly into the VLE to facilitate a wide range of different pedagogical practice and implement that into the course design as much as possible. Things like authentic assessment, flipped classroom, implementing more formative and summative moments into the course design for feedback, for example. And we're around about 12 years now. I think we were founded in 2012 in TU Delft. Initially around that concept of feedback. Initially it started out as a solution for students to give feedback to their teacher on how they were delivering courses, but quickly realized that wasn't scalable, but still maintained that element of feedback and having the ability for students to receive more formative moments of feedback from multiple different providers. And that's developed today into the teaching and learning system that we see today. And being around, of course, now for a long time as we have, and with the emergence of AI, we have over 200 partners worldwide. We speak at initiatives like this, weeks like this, conferences a lot. We hear a lot from the market, and I suppose what we wanted to share with you today is some of the common approaches that we see towards AI in terms of policy, and the reasons for this, and looking at how we can shift and diversify assessment to remove some of the risks that AI possesses onto some of the most important learning outcomes in terms of skills and competencies in the course design. So we'll be talking a little bit about the common approaches that we see, both from our partners and really just in the landscape as a whole. We'll be looking at simple ways in which you can integrate AI into the course design, and also how can we implement some AI-proof alternatives into the course design, shifting away from traditional assessment methods into different pedagogies like authentic assessment to really ensure the development of these core competencies and skills. Of course, being an educational technology provider and AI being a really hot topic, we're looking at how we can integrate AI in order to facilitate the development of these learning outcomes and these core competencies and skills. So we'll talk a little bit about how we're doing that. We'll take a quick look at it in solution, and we'll just kind of give a little bit of background as to why we believe that this is the correct way to implement AI into solutions, trying to keep as much as that integrity in the assessments as possible. As well, we will be speaking about some of the preliminary results from a JISC AI research pilot that we ran. We had 5 institutions take part in a research pilot looking at kind of effective and equitable implementation of AI into their institutions. And we'll speak a little bit about the results and the feedback that we've received from that. And in terms of the common approaches, so as I mentioned, we have a lot of partners. Myself and Luke and our partner team, we speak to institutions more or less every day and have been doing so for the past 2 years, as I mentioned, and AI comes up without fail every single time. It's a really big focus in the landscape, a really big concern. And also from our perspective, a really big opportunity. But these are the 3 common approaches that we see. So avoid and detect, looking at protecting traditional assessment methods, looking at the forbidden use of AI completely, and to try and protect the way those traditional assessment methods are formulated and traditional course design is created by removing the risk of generative AI as much as possible and completely at all. We see some institutions utilizing AI, so from the faculty perspective, utilizing AI to save time in terms of the generation of quiz questions and the generation of model answers, for example. Also on the student perspective, trying to close the skill gap as much as possible, uploading submissions into generative AI for correction on grammar and things of that nature. Also looking to close the skill gap as much as possible, getting quick research or quick summaries on certain things as much as possible. And also the embracing of that. So this is kind of where we fall in, and we see a lot of institutions adopting this approach as well, looking at using AI in an assistive manner rather than a generative manner, and looking at fostering these feedback literacy skills these personal skills and development of these core competencies and skills that are relevant for the employability market. And I wanted to show you or speak to you a little bit about this initiative that we came across, or that I came across about 2 weeks ago after our AI for Inclusive Learning webinar with a man called Richard Power. I was followed up with after from one of the attendees to make me aware of this initiative from Lance Eaton. He's the Director of Faculty Development at College Unbound. And these are not a partner of ours. This is just a resource that was supplied to us after a webinar we hosted. And essentially what it was is a collaborative document, a collection of syllabus and policies around AI generative tools in specific courses. So funnily enough, in terms of the common approaches that we see, they're very similar in this document. Policies from forbidden to use, allowed to use, even some instances of mandatory use. And over the last 18 months, it's developed to 165 examples from multiple different institutions across the world in multiple different disciplines and course designs. But also what we see because of these insertions or policies being integrated into the document in a chronological order, you can see a very clear trend in the very initial aspects was really around that avoid and detect, a real kind of fear and a knee-jerk reaction. To be fair, and slowly as you read through the use cases and documents, you start seeing a lot more embracing of a lot more mandatory use of AI. But it's a really cool document. I'll jump out and just give a snapshot as to kind of how that looks. I can move this. It's the recording back. Yeah, so really good resource for all the attendees. I'm not sure if we'll get a list, but if you have an interest to see it, owen@feedbackfruits.com, drop me an email and I can forward this over. But it's really cool, really good read. And again, with it being in kind of chronological order, you do see a definite kind of shift in the trend around the perception of that. And just a little bit more kind of on the approaches. Yeah, there we go. Well, thanks, Rob. Just a little bit around the approaches themselves. So that avoid and detect, as we mentioned, kind of in the early days or in the first kind of introduction of generative AI, I think this was the common approach. A bit of a knee-jerk reaction, kind of in fear and in misunderstanding of what the solution was, but also I would say a very fair and rational kind of worry because of traditional assessment methods and how they're formulated. With the increase of generative AI, it's very easy for students to create one-time assessment deliverables, one-time assessment research papers, and what they're losing out on with disability is the development of those core competencies and skills that we're looking to create: academic writing skills, research skills, critical evaluation skills, those critical thinking skills, looking at a piece of work, being able to critically evaluate that and form your own opinions based on research that you're partaking in. However, with the rise of generative AI, it's a very easy out for students to create these using generative AI and miss out on the development of these core competencies. And in terms of the approaches, we believe the opportunities are actually more present in policies that are using the utilization of AI or also embracing it completely. So looking at how we can use AI to shift away from traditional assessment methods in order to ensure that students are still developing these core competencies by shifting course design a little bit, looking at those feedback literacy skills, those personal skills and employability skills that are going to be relevant in the job market. And as well, one of the employability skills that is going to emerge in terms of for organizations and how they're focused on kind of operational excellence actually in using AI and those AI literacy skills is going to be something that's important and that we'll see in the job market ever increasing in years to come. But also from the faculty perspective, just in terms of the environment, we were speaking about it earlier in terms of budgets and deficits and challenges within institutions currently. In the current economical landscape, teams are getting smaller, student ratios in comparison to teachers are getting a lot bigger. So also for you guys in terms of utilizing AI in order to save as much time as possible and to be able to implement different course design strategies with a little bit of ease that competencies and skills are still being developed while kind of lessening your workload per se. And so what does that look like in terms of that assessment piece? So we've kind of discussed a little bit the difficulties or the limitations of that avoid and detect, or even just traditional assessment methods as a whole. And how is that going to have to change, and how is that going to have to look with the emergence of generative AI and its ever presence in the landscape at the moment? So looking at making assessment more continuous and holistic. So having multiple assessment points through the course to reflect progress and not a one-time grade. So shifting away from this traditional one-paper development that can easily be generated by AI, and looking at how we can have students display their knowledge in different ways, and also have different moments for assessment, whether it be formative and summative throughout the course design, shifting away from traditional methods. Also multimodal. So different media for task and assessment, again, to present knowledge in different ways, whether this is oral presentations, whether it's live consultations in, for example, a medical field, whether it's live negotiations in a business context, whatever that may be, also in different media formats, so delivering content or assessment deliverables in multimedia formats. Stuff that's a little bit more difficult to fake, stuff that's just not as easily accessible using generative AI, to try and combat against the use of that as much as possible. Videos, audio clips, screen records, discussions, role plays, things of that nature, implementing assessments that are multimodal in different media. Also making it a little bit more skill-based. So again, the skills that the employability market is looking for, while of course academic and research skills are always going to have heavy importance in the university space, when they move on into that employability space, especially now with AI taking away the responsibility on employees for a lot of administrative tasks, for example, what they're going to be looking for in the employability market is, are you a good leader? Can you manage your time well? Do you have the ability to critically think? Are you strategic? Different sorts of competencies and skills are going to be what's required and what the market is looking for with the emergence and the presence of generative AI. As well, formative and summative assessments, another skill probably that I should have mentioned in terms of making the curriculum a little bit more skill-based, is that feedback literacy piece. So very important for students to be able to, first of all, deliver feedback, second of all, to receive feedback and improve on further iterations of their work or their contributions, or further develop their skills, having received those feedback touch points. And in order to develop that, using course design, there has to be moments for formative and summative assessments. And it ties in a little bit to that multi-layer piece. So having feedback, which again also ties into easing your guys' workload in the current climate and landscape with high student ratios, for example, shifting away the assessment responsibility, of course, not entirely, because that's never going to be relevant or useful, but in terms of developing these core skills and having multiple feedback touch points for students throughout the course or throughout their university career, offering this feedback from multiple different providers, instructors, peers, self, even AI generated in some instances, if you're taking a really embracing kind of AI policy. And also having this being summative and formative on skills, on deliverables, tying it all in together on deliverables that are multimedia and multiple assessment points throughout the course design as a whole. And how does that look in terms of the course design and how that can shift? So we love at Feedback Fruits, kind of our course design pedagogies looking at the course design as a whole and trying to implement things like, for example, authentic assessments, or another way you can describe this is the diversification of assessment. So having, again, feedback to come from multiple different providers in varying media and deliverable formats on varying criteria in terms of focusing on skills as well as the deliverable itself, in order to try as much as possible as we can to combat the use of AI. So how that might look, for example, in terms of quick tips and how this can be implemented would be something like embedding question and discussion points within course material and course material that students have to engage with. For AI, it's a little bit difficult to take context into consideration when answering questions. So a really cool way to kind of try and avoid that or combat the use of that as much as possible is to actually embed it within the material itself. We also have in this example clarification sessions. Also, this is going to be where we include a group assignment We have some opportunity for personalized or automated AI feedback. Of course, these are feedback through solutions, but generative AI at the moment can also be used for the correction of, for example, academic writing pieces as well in terms of lower order skills, spelling, grammar, references, things like that. Also, we have an opportunity for peer feedback, so having students improve their feedback literacy skills here. This again could be in a different media format. They could be reviewing each other's group submissions in terms of video, whether it be an academic paper, but offering students that moment to receive a piece of summative feedback to improve on their work, but also the importance in the process of actually engaging in that activity to develop those feedback literacy skills and improve their ability to deliver and receive feedback and use that for when they move past their university careers. Also, what's always going to be present and prevalent is, of course, instructor feedback. There's a moment for that in there too. And also a group assessment, so assessing each other's soft skills, assessing each other's contribution to the group work and to the project and to the deliverable, offering individualized grades based on this, and giving students the opportunity to receive feedback on their competencies and skills, to hopefully give them the ability to use this to improve on further iterations of their work as they progress through their university career. And in terms of those learning journeys, this is an extract from our Learning Design community website page. The link will be in the slides, which I'll share with Rob afterwards to disperse. But really cool ways to understand. There's some assignment writing with ChatGPT learning journeys, for example. So there's a couple of different ones that will be highly relevant to the conversation as well that we're having today, to give you some ideas. And I suppose just a couple of tips on how to kind of take a first step, or perhaps these are kind of beyond this as well, but beyond this stage in your integration or implementation of AI into the class. But just a couple of tips in terms of what we've seen work for our partners and use cases that we heard even yesterday from the University of Liverpool at EMFD in a marketing course. But having students actually critically evaluate an AI generated piece of content. So that's something we've seen as being very useful, again, focusing on those critical evaluation skills, on those research skills, also kind of removing the ability for them to use it because they've already seen it, critically evaluated it, and they won't then submit that as a piece of their own work probably later on, hopefully. Also having students compare the results of different AI tools. So having different AI tools generate a very similar submission, have them critically evaluate the differences between the two, and to create a reflection piece or a small report on the evident differences that they're seeing and the positives and negatives of that is something that's been really common and good practice. Also have students use AI as a study buddy. So this is something, again, like we talked about in terms of that equity gap and that skill gap, closing that on some of the lower order elements of the work that they do in terms of punctuation, grammar, spelling, whatever that may be. And also for you guys using AI to create formative quiz questions and discussion points. It is really, really good, in fairness, as a solution, as scary as it is, and as the amount of risks that it poses to traditional assessment. It's really good. Use it to use our advantage, especially in the current climate and landscape, to create those engaging discussion prompts, those engaging questions as much as possible. And again, all of these strategies help improve students' AI literacy skills, which we're going to see as huge importance in the employability market in the near future, or probably even already, to be fair. And just a little bit now on, from all of this feedback and our interactions with partners, with the market, with the landscape as a whole, how we are looking at implementing AI into our solutions. This is also evident in what we're constantly researching and improving on with the JISC AI research pilot that we'll speak about in a moment. But the focus for us is that it's always a pedagogy first approach. So we love to say, for us, the pedagogy comes before the technology, not the other way around. It's not the technology driving the pedagogies that we're implementing. All of our solutions are developed alongside our partners and have been since the start of the business. So it comes from the market and the technology comes after the fact, and it's the same perception with the AI. We want to use AI in an assistive manner rather than a generative manner to foster the development of core competencies and skills as much as possible. We want to empower educators, is well primary, top of mind for us, enabling personalized feedback to close the skill equity gap, to remove some of that responsibility from the lecturer, also giving lecturers the comfort and solace in implementing feedback and having it come from multiple providers and having them be able to do that with confidence with the assistive nature of some of our AI solutions within the tool. So implementing peer review activities, implementing even self-assessments and reflections, and giving students as much guidance as possible to make sure that those activities are actually worthwhile in terms of the feedback that they're receiving, that it's constructive, and they're actually learning more how to do that. And also responsible use of AI. So leveraging AI to aid learning and not having it replace the learning process. So shifting away again from that generative piece, moving more into an assistive perception of that. 22, still a bit of time. And I suppose just to kind of give an insight into how that looks in terms of what we've implemented and how we're kind of doing that at the moment, I want to just share a couple of snippets as to how that looks within our solutions. So we have a couple of different ways in which we do this, just to kind of clarify a little bit. The perception and thought behind it is a certain way, but how it's done, we have a couple of different things. So we have an automated feedback solution, and this delivers lower order feedback on things like spelling, grammar, word count, references, section titles, and there's 27 different set criteria that it will assess. Looking at, for example, very, very useful in use cases for English as a second language when writing academic papers, but even just the diversity of the student population. There's a lot of skill gaps and equity gaps present, and trying to close that as much as possible. And also from the teacher perspective, removing that burden on use. And we'll take a look at that. We also have our self-assessment coach, our feedback coach, and our reflection coach. And essentially what these bots do, overall it's called a kite, but they're individual different solutions. What it will do is it will give students feedback on the feedback that they're delivering to their peers, or in their self-assessment or in their reflection step. So taking into account the assessment criteria that's present. For example, student says, links an organization to a part of the document and says bad. The bot will give a little bit of insight into how that feedback can be improved. Again, making use comfortable in implementing and shifting the responsibility of feedback, not entirely, or really like just a little bit away from use, to kind of save you guys our time, and having confidence in the ability to do that. And also, again, the reflection coach, something really recently generated also, as I mentioned. Its quality in doing so is having AI generate question prompts, really interesting and engaging discussion prompts, having them contextual, related to a specific piece of course material, and embedding that within. And we'll take a look at a couple of them now together, just to kind of conceptualize how that looks. So in a Canvas environment here, as you can see, it displays as any other Canvas activity would. It opens within an iframe, and this is the automated feedback solution. This can be included in a workflow for something like a peer review activity, where there is a written deliverable in order for a first sense check before it gets forwarded onto peers for assessment. Again, focusing the peers assessment also on the really relevant content in theory. But how this looks in solution, we've submitted a document. We can see our feedback points directly inline annotated with the document. We can move through our suggestions. This has been example for abbreviation is not introduced. We have different ones, such as where we're using active voice, where we should be using active voice, in fact, where it might be a little bit passive. And these are all points that are marked in gray throughout the document. And pedagogically, what we expect is that the solution doesn't auto-correct the mistakes that the students are making. What it does is flag them. Students will then have to actually go back, make those corrections and alterations themselves based on the recommendation, resubmit the document, and assess their performance in that regard. So pedagogically, not like uploading it into, for example, ChatGPT and having that corrected for them, actually getting the pedagogical value and going back, correcting it themselves, getting that repetition. So that's one example. Let me exit out of full screen. We're going to jump into, I'll just show the reflection coach, because the feedback coach and the reflection coach and the self-assessment coach all work in a very similar manner. It just gives feedback on the feedback that students have inserted. So I had a workflow and jumping from it. I think it was the document, and then I jumped to the video. So this is our interactive document solution, where students will engage with course content together as a group, as a collaborative exercise. They have the ability to answer teacher-inserted discussion prompts, answer teacher questions, create their own questions or discussion prompts, and they engage with that together live in the document. And there is a reflection step in this activity to help students conceptualize what did they actually get out of this activity and what was the benefits of it, what can they probably do to improve in the future. And our reflection coach, as you can see here just along the bottom, works very, very similarly in terms of the feedback. Let's just say I enjoyed this activity, for example, as a reflection step. And the coach will give us a little bit more insight into how to improve this. So please provide more details and specific examples about why you enjoyed the activity. This will help me give you constructive feedback. This develops these bots for us in terms of demonstrations are a nightmare because we fight with them all the time as well, trying to get it to tell us that we've actually left a really relevant reflection or a really relevant piece of feedback. Activity, because it allowed me to engage with my peers, for example. And again, it's a good start, but again, a little bit more iterative feedback. It's a good start, but it could be more constructive and focus on the assignment. Try to provide specific areas of improvement for yourself for the next activity. Again, very similar with the automated feedback coach. Takes your comments, tells you it's not really relevant to the section of the rubric you're assessing with. It's not really particularly constructive. Try provide examples for which your peer can improve on it in the future. Things of that nature. Also the generation of content as well for these interactive videos. I'm not sure it's actually turned on in this one. However, we have the ability to have the AI assess the content that's embedded, whether it be a PDF, a video, or an audio piece, and then based on the content, then generate questions based on what's in there, what could be useful for students to take out, questions to answer, discussions to have. And much like with the approaches, as we mentioned earlier, it's still developing in a lot of institutions. It's different everywhere. It's different sometimes even on a course level. For each even school, for example, or department in an institution. So it can be really, really varying. And we do have a lot of use with this in the UK. Imperial College London have implemented the automated feedback for lower order skills. And they've also implemented the feedback coach in their group member evaluation. And actually, funnily enough, in that use case, which would be relevant to share after, I probably should have included it in the slides, to be fair. In battling with the feedback coach, the group member evaluation solution was integrated intermittently throughout the course, and what they actually seen was that students were completing the activity quicker, having worked with the feedback coach, which from that you can kind of imply that their feedback literacy was improving as they were delivering constructive feedback against the bot quicker. So that was something that was really interesting. But what we wanted to do was to offer institutions in the UK the opportunity to come and use some of our AI solutions to assess really their relevance and their use in this market, because of course we're across the world in the US and policies are different everywhere, and we wanted to get a little bit of feedback in terms of what institutions are trying to do. Are we helping them in doing that? So we launched this JISC AI research pilot, and we had 5 institutions, both from higher education and also further education, so different demographics there too. It was completely free for them to take part. It was a 6-month duration, and they had access to all the tools that had AI components within them. So at that point, it was the automated feedback tool, the peer review, and the group member evaluation, which included the automated feedback coach, and the reflection coach and self-assessment coach actually didn't exist at that point. So it's a new iteration. But yeah, we had University of Bradford, Cardiff and Vale College, Sandwell College, and the University Centre in Leeds from further and higher education, and they wanted to implement or try and implement AI for the reasons of reducing teacher workload. So looking at that delivering a feedback piece, the lower order skills feedback piece, also improving learner autonomy and agency. So again, looking at that feedback literacy piece, improving that core competency and skill within their students, and also just to introduce students to AI in a structured way. So having a way that's a little bit, again, assistive rather than generative. releasing, both for faculty and from the student perspective, that kind of bugaboo around AI and implementing it in a way that was structured and what would you say, condensed kind of into a certain space or moment. And preliminary findings just from what we've heard back. So students finding the feedback helpful was very good in terms of, I believe this is only from, I think, 3 institutions. I think we're still finalising the report, and that will be available on JISC once it's fully published. But initial preliminary findings is that students were finding the feedback useful, both from the automated feedback and also in the peer review activities that they had took part in. Continued use, a little bit more mixed. Some students definitely, other students probably, and a couple unsure. So still kind of over a short period of time, maybe in terms of the development of these feedback literacy skills and just their comfortability in using AI, this might shift a little bit. But as I said, it was over a 6-month period. So perhaps we would have seen perhaps a lot more probablys and definitely's, or perhaps kind of change the unsure's mind over a little bit more time duration. But this is just what we're hearing so far. And in terms of concrete examples, so Sandwell colleges, they like the automated feedback. They believe it has the potential to close some of the equity gaps for lower order feedback. As well, Sandwell College being a further education institution, I think this is somewhere where there might be a little bit more prevalence and relevance than in comparison to some of the more prestigious universities, for example, although neurodiversity and the diversity student population exists everywhere, but it might be a little bit more heavily prevalent in these places. The Education Training Centre felt the use of interactive video actually increased the workload on staff. As I mentioned, with the goals that they were looking to do, they were looking to reduce teacher workload, and they perceived that in terms of the facilitation of activities. They wanted the capability for the solution to generate questions and to generate discussion points and course content for them. At that point, it didn't have that, but listening to this feedback, it's something that we've developed and implemented into some of the solutions as well. And also Sandwell College, again, they felt that the feedback coach made peer review activities a more viable option for instructors to implement because of the level of the feedback that was being received through implementing things like the coach. So it gave them a little bit more solace and a little bit more confidence in implementing these type of activities and reduced their workload as the goal, which was, as they set out in the beginning. But again, still preliminary. We still have another couple of institutions to hear back from. I think we even need to go back to some of the institutions for further evaluations, and there will be a full report posted on JISC, but just kind of what we found through the implementation in a diverse range of institutions so far, just to understand a little bit how institutions would use it, could use it, would they, and just to hear a little bit more about their policies around things like this. And some of the key takeaways just from the session as a whole. So generative AI tools, they're here to stay. They're not going anywhere. They're getting actually better, more complex to kind of take this avoid and detect approach. Also in terms of, as I mentioned, in terms of the skills that organizations are going to be looking for as they progress, they're going to be looking at these AI literacy skills. They're going to be here, they're getting better. We need to learn how we can shift assessment and embrace them more so than take this avoid and detect approach. We believe there's more opportunities in that space. And again, integrating AI into your teaching doesn't have to be overwhelming, of course, in our solutions. We try and integrate it as much as possible. Technology, again, looking at the landscape and budgets and economic things, it can be difficult to have the best in class solutions in order to facilitate these, but there is already some really good tips out there in terms of for example, comparing 2 different generative AI solutions. Use it to create model answers for students. You might even scare them in that sense if they see the model answer that when they generate it and theirs is the same, that they can't use it. So causing them to critically evaluate a little bit more that model answer or alter it a little bit. Also using it as a study buddy, using it in terms of having students just do critical evaluations on pieces of work that have been generated by AI. There's some couple of easy tips there to do that. We had a really good use case, as I mentioned, from the School of Marketing yesterday at the conference, where one of the lecturers in the marketing department had them generate a AI generated image of a marketing campaign, also their marketing blurb. And what they had to do was critically assess both the generative image and also the blurb and improve upon that as much as possible using the submission or the example from generative AI. And that's happening right in here. So you guys are a little bit ahead of the curve of it, evidently. And also start evaluating your learning outcomes and assessment methods. So again, looking at how we can shift away from these traditional assessment methods, have more focus on competencies and skills, understanding the landscape that's around us and the requirements that are going to exist in the employability market, and trying to replicate that as much as possible in our course designs, diversifying the assessment methods, and again, without losing that integrity piece and trying to maintain as much of that integrity as possible. Yeah, and it's about kind of reinventing assessments a little bit, not necessarily just in the redesigning or in the taking that avoid and tech approach, but as I mentioned, shifting it to a focus on skills, diversifying as much as possible, using your assessment design to combat against the use of AI as much as possible, but not forbidding it, and embracing it as much as possible where it's of benefit, in that assistive nature, not in the generative nature. Save your own time, improve student skills, focusing on it from that perspective. And then I suppose just a little bit for us again, in the benefit of actually implementing educational tools can make it easier to embrace AI. So that was one of the main points in the JISC AI pilot, looking to implement it in a structured way for you guys as well, and using the previous tips, introducing it to students in a structured way, trying not to make it that not speak about topic or not use topic, and have them actually improve their AI literacy skills throughout taking part in their course. And that's all from me. I have time for questions, if there is any. But yeah, that's us. Thanks for having me, I suppose.
Thank you. Any questions in the room?
I didn't take a look at the chat now either, but if you have questions in the room, yeah.
Turn the light, just turned to night here for some reason. I've done quite a time today. But yeah, is there any questions that you want to ask?
Yeah. Owen, thanks for the talk. It's really interesting. I just wanted to ask from your perspective about assignments, and whether, if you look at level 4 assignments, look at Bloom's taxonomy, we can't get students at that level necessarily, or traditionally we can't get them to critically analyze. So it's very prescriptive, and you do a bit of research, hit the books, and then produce the essay. Okay. So if we take our assessment brief and put that into ChatGPT, you can do a pretty good job of producing something that will get C or B. So what do we do? Do you think assignments at that level, are they dead? Should we replace it with another assessment strategy, or is there a way to keep the assignment but change it in a way that's appropriate for level 4? It's just really nothing. I'm just going to talk around that. What would you do?
Yeah.
Do you mind repeating that question? Sorry,
Yes, yeah.
Just similar.
So sorry, remind me of your name.
My name's Dean.
Dean has just asked, just for those online, essentially in a nutshell, whether traditional kind of assessments are dead in that research piece, and my perception on that from what we hear from the market. Because you mentioned that they can take some prompts and generate a really good C or B level paper for something that's kind of structured in this way, and what do we see in terms of the shift of that, and is that kind of true, or what we see? I think in terms of, is it dead? I think no. I think there's always going to be a focus, especially from university institutions, on research. So there is a percentage of students within any cohort that will look to be involved in the university space for the rest of their lives. They want to conduct research, they want to be in academia, they want to teach, they want to be professors, whatever that may be. And those research skills will always be prevalent and relevant. And for those people, they're going to be the people understanding that this is the space that they want to be in, that will actually conduct the research and go about it more ethically, because they understand that these skills are required for them in their pursuit of work. However, there's also a percentage, probably, arguably, maybe even a higher percentage, that are not going to be in academia for their life. They're coming to university in order to develop knowledge and skills, in order to be a good employee, to be an attractive employee. So taking into account that those two types of students exist, there needs to be a focus within the assessment and the curriculum design for the development of both those academic skills, but also those core competencies and employability skills. We actually had a talk about skills the other day, and there's so many names: personal skills, competencies, employability skills, whatever you want to call them, just those elements of students being able to deliver feedback, take that feedback on, to critically evaluate things, even just in terms of their leadership style, their leadership qualities and capabilities. Can they work as part of a team? So no, it's not dead in terms of those traditional assessment methods, and they're always going to be relevant and prevalent. But what we have to do, or what we need to see, is more consideration for the development of competencies and skills throughout the course design. So implementing things like group projects. So although that will still might have an element of an end study or an end report or an end piece of research, what they get through doing that in a group method is also a focus on the development of these competencies and skills. So being smart in where you implement this into the course design is what we're seeing. John?
Interesting, thank you.
Oh, that's fine. That's fine. Could you give us any quick fixes to
In terms of?
the incoming problem of AI and assessment? I've got no understanding.
Quick fixes. Quick fixes is hard. Quick fixes is definitely hard. I think really, and what AI has given us, I believe, from my opinion, personally, I was a student over COVID. So I've done a year and a half on campus. I've done a year and a half off campus. Supposed to be a 4-year degree with a year internship, turned into a 3-year degree, 50-50. So I don't know if you are familiar with Dublin, but what you have in Dublin is you have HP, Dell, Apple, LinkedIn, mega headquarters for all the biggest US companies and institutions. And I leave having not done an apprenticeship, or not an apprenticeship, an internship. And I have no evidence of any skills. And that means that institutions or organizations like that, they won't look at people like us, like me at that time. So I then moved to Amsterdam, where startups are a little bit more flexible in who they'll take a chance on, just for example. So for me, what I would have loved to have seen, or loved to have had evidence of throughout my academic career, was actually the ability at the end to display these competencies and to display these skills to potential employers when I finished. And I hadn't got that. And a lot of people leave without having that. And that's the challenge that people face. So whether it be, for example, I've done a business degree and I'm now doing this with feedback fruit, so it makes sense. But there's some people that might do, geez, who knows, a psychology degree, but then might kind of go into sales for an online psychology company, for example. The skills there are different to the theory and the practice and research that you conducted throughout your studies. The skills are different, although the information is similar, and you have no ability to display that these skills have been developed. So I think quick fix is hard, because I think it really does require a bigger shift and a bigger importance placed on the development of competencies and skills in the way that institutions all over the world are organizing their course designs. There's quick ways to integrate, quick, simple ways to make people comfortable with AI, and quick little assessment shifts, like changing from individual projects to group projects, that can be of really good benefit to that. But I think it's a little bit more wholesale in terms of the course design and changes that need to happen in a lot of places that we see.
Great. There's a question online which I'll just get up to you on the chat. From Ewan. Thanks for that, Ewan. So on the screen there, you can see it.
Yeah. So do we see it? Yes, we do. A common question. We do demonstrations a lot. We show the bot, and often the first question is, can you turn that off? Happens a lot. So there is a lot of apprehension around implementing things like this. I think a lot of the fear around the implementation, because I think a lot of people, I should probably look because I'm speaking online, around the implementation is there's a lot of fear around it. There's a lot of things even perhaps not even directly related to education or the benefits of more like data privacy and compliance and things like that can cause a little bit of a scare for instructors or for central teams in implementing things like this. So I think very easily to remove as many of those concerns as possible, because as I said, it's pedagogy first, so it's kind of hard to argue with the concept behind it, because it's what we hear from a lot of institutions in terms of it being assistive rather than generative. The main concerns kind of come on the back end of, is it safe? Am I going to get in trouble for implementing it? Is it going against our policy? So I think when you can address them concerns, there's a lot more comfort then from teams and from institutions to implement them. And the initial fear is generally, oh, is that in line with policy? So once we can address those, generally it's a little bit easier to convince, I would say. Thanks for asking, Neil.
Any more questions in the room? Online?
Yes, go ahead.
I'll just put this here and then they'll be able to hear you.
I loved your presentation, by the way.
Thanks.
So you spoke without hesitation, deviation, or repetition.
Thank you.
Feedback Fruits, the VLE plugin.
Yes.
Is it available to trial? Can we look at it? Can we?
Yeah, so we have a lot of institutions in the UK. We've been in discussions with it with Rob and a couple of his team members. It's not available to trial here right now, but we're hoping to get to that point. We've been at the conference yesterday. We're here today to speak. Processes can take a while, but it is available to trial to assess the relevance to institutions, to then look to move into what actually makes sense to move forward with on a longer term basis. But in terms of for yourself, if you have any use cases in mind, I want to have a look closer, I can definitely organize something like that with you. But yeah, we'll be speaking in October 17th, is it 17th?
October 17th.
October 17th at the Digital Hub. So we'll be speaking again, which will be a little bit more of a granular look at the solution and at us rather than on the topic of AI. So if you have interest in joining that, please come along, and also to the group online as well. I forgot to mention that. So we'll be back on October 17th.
Brilliant. Thank you. Thank you for the questions.
Yes, thanks for the questions.
Yeah,
Thanks
thank
for
you very
having us.
much. The camera will stay on you, so that's fine. I've just put the Digital Education Network. So yeah, we're going to explore, as we always do in these events, online platform solutions, look at the pros and cons, talk to you again. But
Yep.
Thank you to Owen and Luke, who've flown in from Amsterdam. So they're off later on back on their flight. And yeah, thank you everyone online.